Hola and welcome back to Voz Memos. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through some troubling stats about the gender pay gap persisting into 2024. And for the book talk and bookstagrammers, I'm going to review I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue, which is a corporate comedy. Today I'm drinking a matcha latte, so find your beverage of choice before we get into this episode of Voz Memos. So welcome back, everyone. I'm going to get right into it. Something that sparked the whole idea for this podcast was an article I happened to stumble across on LinkedIn from NACE, which NACE stands for National Association of Colleges and Employers. The only reason I'm following them on LinkedIn is because I used to work at a career center for a college, and so I guess I ended up following them, or I have a lot of connections that are following them. And they published an article about the class of 2022's First Destination Survey, which, if you've graduated from college recently, then you're very familiar with the First Destination Survey, which you're supposed to take right after or right around when you graduate to let your college know what job you got, how much you're getting paid, what industry did you end up going into, does it align with your major, things like that. And so NACE was able to put together the statistics from the 2022 survey. That's the most recent one they had. I think it takes a while to get all the responses and all that. So class of 2022, which I didn't even register, is my graduation class. So that made me even more mad when I started reading these statistics. So I summarized just the top few. Number 1, men, and this is for the class of 2022, men have a greater probability of obtaining full-time employment after graduation than women, and it's 81% versus 78%. So that's like not the worst gap, but still, why is there a gap? Then secondly, the average salary for women was $57,000, and this is for that first job, and continues to be well below that of the average for men, which is $69,000. So that's roughly 82% of what men are making. That's not cool. If you factor in bonuses, guaranteed, and like the amount of the bonus, it ends up being 78% of what men are making. So that was troubling to me. And then your next question is, well, surely like we're doing better in some area. I think they ended up saying this gap is equal to that of about like the 2010s. Like in 10 years, we've made no progress on this gap. And then the STEM majors, male, female dominated fields, it all was the same. Men came out on top to varying degrees. So what's the hope here? Because when I hear, oh, we haven't made any progress in 10 years, that is alarming to me, and it makes me sad, and like, what's the point of it? Like, nothing's happening, nothing's changing. And so what I see the hope as is resources. Towards the bottom of the article, it said that undergraduate men in general get offered more jobs than undergraduate women, regardless of whether they use career services. But the use of career services helps narrow the gap. For example, when neither men nor women pursuing STEM majors used career services, men got more job offers than women. And when both women and men in STEM majors used career services, women received more job offers than men. So basically, being a feminist is using your college career center, making sure that the college knows that's an important resource. They need to be funding it. They need to be getting quality staff, and everyone wins. So with that covered, and that there is hope, I want to get into I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue, which is a corporate comedy, super relatable. It actually made me laugh out loud. Like, I can scroll through reels for hours and just like exhale through my nose at all the funny things, but this one actually made me laugh, and I think that's really important, to find things that make you laugh and bring you joy. Plus, it's pink. Like, how cute is that, to be going around to your cafes with a pink book? I had a lot of fun with that. And then, yeah, I would just say get off TikTok, get off Reels, and like read this book because it's super fun. There are some heavy topics, which we'll get into. But basically, the main character, Jolene, is Iranian Canadian, which I love that. That's the same as the author. And in the last episode, we were talking about, should authors write what they're writing if they don't have any stake in that culture? Should they be writing about things that they have no part of, like straight authors writing about gay stories and white authors writing about minority stories? If you want to know more about my thoughts on that, definitely tune into the last episode. But this author, she's bomb, and you can tell she loves her culture. She has a passion for sharing it with people, and that's what really shines through in this book, is that, I mean, you can tell that she has grown up with the culture, and I learned so much about what it would be like to be Iranian Canadian. And I learned about the foods. Yeah, like her parents played a huge role in her life. Jolene is 33, and I kept forgetting that during the book, that she's a millennial, because she kind of reads like a younger person in their career. And especially because her parents are so involved in her life. But honestly, I hope that my parents are that involved when I'm 33, like that I'm seeing them all the time, and that we get to share family dinners, and that they know about what's going on with me. So I loved hearing about like Jolene's culture, the Farsi, the food, her parents, and especially her mom with her eccentric circle of aunties, where she would get all her best spices from. Like, I could picture it so vividly, and I think that's really only something that an author with that background could capture. And that's exactly what I want to do with my book that I'm writing. Like, I want to infuse my culture in it. I think I loved hearing about like that mixture of cultures, which is kind of what I grew up experiencing with my Mexican American heritage. And it just makes me so optimistic that there's a book like this on the shelf. Another thing this book did a pretty good job about doing is normalizing living at home. Jolene lived at home before she got the job that the book centers around. I guess I should probably say what the book is about. I'll just read you like the inside flap, or a part of it. How about that? When an IT mix-up grants Jolene access to her entire department's private emails and DMs, she knows she should report it, but who could resist reading what their coworkers are really saying? And when she discovers layoffs are coming, she realizes this might be the key to saving her job. The plan is simple: gain her boss's favor, convince HR she's Super Shop's material, and beat out the competition. Isn't that so fun? So basically, after she got the job at Super Shop, she was able to move out, but she's dealing with a lot of mental health issues that the book goes into later on. And I mean, it's so hard. It's becoming harder and harder to land that initial job and to build up a security or safety net to weather through layoffs without moving home. And for a lot of the book, Jolene knows that these layoffs are coming, and she's pretty embarrassed about the idea of possibly having to move home again. There's a lot of anxiety around that. But like, her parents are very normal about it. They're like, we want you to save money. If you ever need to move home, you can. And I think that's such a healthy relationship. So I think this book, like, if there are more and more books like this that share like the real experience of what it's like once you graduate, once you're in your early career, you might be moving home, you might live at home for a time, then that normalizes it throughout the whole culture. So I think that's really important, to get more stories like this. And it's same thing with like normalizing having mixed heritage and having a boring corporate job. I think that was like a huge shock to me after graduating. It was like, oh, There's no more electives. There's no more write your paper about what you're passionate about. Like, you just have a boring job. Like, sorry. And it's fine. Work is work. Like, that's why it's not called fun, right? Some work can better align with the things you're passionate about, yes. But for most people, it is kind of boring. So I liked also hearing about how mundane her job was. And then a huge component of this book was talking about mental health in the workspace, which is not talked about enough. Grief and burnout. So the central plot point of the book is dealing with the fallout from losing a loved one. And the workplace can feel like the last place you want to be vulnerable, but it matters so much to share with your colleagues about what you're going through so that they can help support you. And while I was reading this book, it was really reminding me that we're just a few months after the anniversary of my mama Angie passing away last year. And I know it felt so strange and awkward to me to be grieving at work. But at least after I shared what I was going through, that's when like my coworkers had some empathy for me and I didn't feel so alone. And, at the end of the book, I think something that was really underscored is you never know what's going on in someone's personal life. And what really brings us together in the office is being human in the office. And Jolene had to learn that. And eventually she does. Some things I wish the book touched on more was a non-toxic work environment does exist. And yeah, the work environment had to suck to kind of drive the plot. But she could have had at least one friend that was yeah, that doesn't seem right, or that's not what my office is like. Something like that. I'm just thinking if younger, early career professionals are reading this book, what models do they have for the office? And especially if they're in a toxic environment, people need that validation that there are healthy work environments. Yeah, lastly, like I said earlier, Jolene is a millennial, although a lot of her actions and reactions felt very early career. And I think that's just an opportunity for my book that I'm writing to fill in that gap. We need more stories for Gen Z about Gen Z, and Gen Z's only been in the office for a few years. So I'm really looking forward to my book and more like mine, next to this book on the shelves. I can totally see the book I wrote is more focused on landing that first job, kind of how we were talking about how hard it is to land that first job with those statistics at the beginning. So that's kind of what my book centers on, but I could totally see myself writing a sequel with either in the same universe or with some of the same characters that explores the dynamics once you're in that first job and the emotional roller coaster that comes with that. So that's all I had for you today. If you enjoyed the podcast and the episode, definitely give me a rating, follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I have a video podcast version of it that goes up on YouTube every week alongside the audio. And if you want to follow on social media, there's an Instagram and a TikTok at Voz Memos. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.